Hey everybody, this is Perch, and this video is going to try and balance a bad event and a good event. All right, so there's no viewer mail, just my own personal opinion. So I want to tell you this kind of story, or kind of work into this video the best way I know how. So let me try and make it personal for a minute. So obviously, if you've heard this channel, I ran a comic store for off and on close to 30 years, long time. And I was certainly a collector lover of comics. I don't know if that's a lover. That sounds weirdly personal, but I enjoy comics. And I can always find, and that is true today. So, by the way, all the hate channel, the people who go out there like comics are shit. I did this video with Joe where we were like, it was a joke around looking at comics where they, or not comics, but some fan artist had taken female characters and put gay men into the female character costumes. It was funny. Joe and I were having a bit with it. And I decided to troll the audience by creating a thumbnail that said, Marvel and DC are falling apart. And there are people in the comments who are like, oh yeah, Marvel and DC are fucked. They clearly didn't watch the video. They saw the thumbnail and they went all in. The video had zero to do with that thumbnail. That was kind of that was the troll. You can be pissed at me for that. That was the idea. Anyway, but I definitely have a lot of fond memories of comics. I still do. Every single month, I can find comics I enjoy. Even from the big two, there's always some good comics out there. There's bad comics. There's good comics. So before I get to the bad comic, well, I mean, it's kind of all inherently tied to it. I want to say I was never the biggest fan of New Mutants. I liked the X-Men, but the New Mutants always felt like it felt like what it was. It was a spinoff. And there was some good stories, a Demon Bear storyline, certainly good. And it took me a while to kind of warm up to these characters because Claremont and others, was it? Did Nascenti go on that? I know that Wheezy went on that title. At any rate, they always, the title always had a problem in that it was X-Men Light, meaning they spent a little bit too much effort talking about how these were the not ready for primetime X-Men. But despite all that, I still fell in love with this title. And what did it for me was this very, and maybe you've heard this, I haven't talked about this in a video in over 2 years, but there was this romance that went on between Cypher and Rain. And the two, it was not a romance. It was very like, ooh, they like each other, don't like each other, because Cypher, Doug Ramsey, went for Psylocke for a period of time. He was kind of there, but there was kind of this underground, like, this is where it's all going. If you read manga today, you're very familiar with things like Deku or Midoriya, kind of going for Uraraka, and there's this underlying romance that isn't out on the surface, but it's there. You kind of you can, as a reader, you're like, oh, it's going to happen someday. And I like so as the New Mutants grow, I grew to like all the characters. I think Sunspot Roberto was always my least favorite, which is kind of interesting because now Marvel has decided he's the most interesting character on the whole team. He is not, but he was always my least favorite. But regardless, this relationship kind of, they became friends, and Doug was struggling with, like, is he relevant to the team? And he had an insecurity complex and everything else. His power wasn't really built for combat, but still there was this kind of underlying kind of romance that was kind of there. And just as they were starting to kind of turn the corner on it to make it more overt, there was this event, Fall of the Mutants, where they killed Doug. Like, he got shot and killed. And I remember, like, shit, this comic is really, Brett Blevins is doing the art, and it was, like, really, like, man. And by the way, if you read some of those Blevins issues, and like all of 4 of you who are listening to this video will, like, testify to this, Blevins drew the perkiest breasts of any artist that was out there. I'm just putting that out there. I know it sounds pervy, but if you read those comics, you know what I'm talking about. So I got really, I came around. It took a while. I definitely respected the storytelling, but I came around to New Mutants being a pretty powerful comic. Later, Rob Liefeld came in. He kind of re-energized the team in a different way, changed it to X Force. To me, the glory era of New Mutants was Blevins and Wheezy. I think Wheezy was the writer at the time. That was just there was something very deep. It was just a good comic. I really enjoyed it. So when you really enjoy a comic, an interesting thing happens. You go back and you read back issues, and even if you read it before, you start to like it better. So I went back and I read the New Mutants kind of special edition, the one shot OGN that Marvel put out to kind of test the waters, see if the title would go. Bob McLeod, Chris Claremont, and I wound up liking it better. I'm like something I'm like, oh, it's okay. And then after kind of growing an attachment to these characters and went back around, I'm like, man, it's really good. So I came to love that title, and it holds a fond part in my memory, both on the kind of for the romance era, but also a lot of the action and things that characters do, the kind of trials of magic, the Magneto as headmaster, all this kind of stuff. Pretty interesting. When Kitty Pryde got kind of kicked down to the team and then rose back up again, all that stuff was pretty cool. So that's a happy memory for me. I don't know about any of you, but I really love that run. So that brings me to the bad part. So a couple weeks ago, New Mutants published their 30th anniversary issue. 30th? No, sorry, I've got it wrong. 40th anniversary issue. So it's New Mutants number 30. It's in the new Krakoa run, and Vita Ayala is a writer on this. And now, if you listen to YouTube, there's a lot of commentators who go really hard at Vita Ayala, just being a token writer, like whatever, all this kind of stuff. Really dislike Vita. Vita wrote, kind of some short stories in an anthology, I think for Wonder Woman, right? I may have that wrong. Anyway, early in Vita's career, I thought there were some decent stories that Vita wrote. And I actually thought, like, hey, you guys are being too hard on Vita. I think Vita does decent writing in the very early stages. But it was weird as Vita's career continued, I think the writing got worse. And by the time Vita was actually on a ongoing title, the writing felt painful. And the New Mutants title that Vita was on was like, it was filled with validation, like characters were validating each other, and it was like it felt nothing like what the title should be. So I picked up New Mutants 30, which was advertised as a 40th anniversary special. So basically, 40 years, New Mutants were going to honor the New Mutants with more pages, doing something kind of unique to the book. This will be special. So I picked up the comic, and a lot of people say this on YouTube, and it doesn't mean anything anymore. So please take this as honesty from me. This is one of the worst comics I've ever read. Far worse than that Robin comic that everybody was getting pissed off about. This comic went past bad into offensive. And when I say offensive, I mean offensive to people who actually like New Mutants and who grew up with this kind of stuff. There's a foreword at the beginning of the comic where Vita basically says, hey, we want to do something special for the 40th anniversary. We want to do it right. Had to blah, blah, blah. Had to actually do something worthy of this milestone. Should we do an action story? Should we do something where the New Mutants meet their past selves, or whatever? It's like ultimately we decided on something more personal. Okay, so what was the personal that Vita decided? And Vita goes over the top in talking about how they had lots of conversation at the X office, lots of people getting involved, everything else. For what it's worth, this appears to be Vita's last comic in the X office. And so Vita wastes no time in talking about how great the opposite, making a little joke about Leah Williams, making her laugh, and the camaraderie. The comic itself features a overarching story of Sunspot has called the New Mutants up to the space barge ship he's in, and he's rented out a beach in Araku for them to go to the beach and hang out. And then the comic contains 3 stories. Story number 1 is Danny Moonstone has lost her weird circle belt and gets so distraught and full of panic about it that she unleashes like crazy horror monsters, and they have to calm her down and tell her she's a good person. And then Sunspot Roberto appears to tell her like he was, he took the belt, but just to get it fixed, and now it's back to her. That was story number 1. Story number 2 was Karma is trying to reconcile her lesbian past, which she's been a lesbian for a while, like quite several years. And this story is going to go into her crushing on a girl at a festival, and the girl has some guy that is trying to say, let's get the lesbian out of you with a good solid dicking. And then Karma shows up to rescue her, but the girl rescues herself and says, thanks for the rescue, but I didn't need you, and let's make out. And story number 3 is Rain and Warlock are searching for a present for Doug. And that's how we're going to honor 40 years of the New Mutants. The problem with this is it doesn't even remotely do any kind of job of writing these characters as they accurately are. The characters are tone deaf wrong on every fucking level of this comic. Nobody comes across authentic to the characters they are. So Vita and the editor, everybody involved in this comic should be goddamn ashamed at the shit way they portrayed these characters. They didn't even close get these characters to an accurate portrayal. And when you're doing a 40th year anniversary honoring the comic, you should make at least a goddamn attempt to get the characters to resemble anything that remotely fucking resembles these characters. But they can't be bothered to do that because we're trying to do cutesy bullshit with with Danny, with Rain, with Warlock, with Karma, and then Shatterstar shows up just to, for whatever fucking reason, be like a LGBTQ guide on how Karma can accept who she is. It doesn't even make it doesn't fit in continuity. It doesn't fit with the characters. It's shit. And at the end of the comic, we get a long thank you for letting me write the X characters epilogue by Vita, where Vita wastes no time in talking about how Vita themselves are a bi person of color, non-binary, and like, it's not about you, asshole. Sorry for being rude about it, but it's not about you. It's about these characters. And I would say, I should probably be nicer because, Vita takes a lot of shit from a lot of stupid people out there. But God, this comic is awful, painfully awful. I read this comic. I'm like, man, this comic actively pissed me off. And then I read it a second time, and I'm like, the funny thing is, the New Mutants always had a greater tether to LGBTQ issues than other Marvel comics. That's not the problem. As I said, Karma has been a lesbian for a while now. That's not the problem either. It's fine. Shatterstar was gay, I don't know, like several years ago. That's not the problem. The problem is these characters are written awful. And for me, somebody who likes New Mutants, likes this era, likes, this, it kind of has an attachment to this stuff, it is painful to see something dressed up like some horrifying skin suit of 40-year anniversary special issue to honor this stuff. It's the forward and epilogue that bugs me the most, where the forward is like, we really wanted to do something to honor the characters. Fuck you. That is you bullshit. It is absolutely not true. You wanted to write a comic that highlighted yourself, because that is exactly what was given to us. And this epilogue, there's more conversation, again, about yourself than about these characters you're supposed to be honoring. And it comes across as the most arrogant, egotistical bullshit thing that you've ever seen. There is no love for these characters portrayed. It is simply an opportunity to kind of make it all about themselves. And that bugs me to no end. Let the characters be gay. They are gay. Karma is absolutely gay. This has nothing to do with that. The New Mutants have a lot of characters that are not white. It's not about race either. If you're trying to do this comic right, you can do it inclusive. You can do it all those things, because that is inherent and true to what the New Mutants are, and have almost always, pretty much from the very beginning. Again, I read that Chris Claremont Bob McLeod issue. I highly doubt that the writer of this comic read those things. Anyway, it drives me absolutely crazy. Anyway, so I had to vent about that, and now I'm done. I don't know. Did you read this comic? Let me know in the comments below. Like and subscribe, of course, and thanks for listening. And now I'm gonna, go in the house and have my kids yell at me. So let's see what that's like. Hey, how are you doing?
Hello.
All right. You're right here. Okay.